All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending our monthly webinar. Sorry, let me start over. Thank you for attending our monthly webinar. This is Catherine. I have turned the camera off because, it's cold and it's just one of those days. And I want to be able to look at a couple different screens I have going here. And so sorry about that for those who like to see a person speaking when they're speaking. But with me today in this webinar are Fonda Powers, Kimberly Dickey, and Lynn Symington. You three are not presenting. I didn't mean to surprise you by making you panelists, but I did want you available in case I have questions on some of the content, and I may need to ask you all for some advice. But this month we are going to sort of roll over from our December open forum webinar because there's were a couple outstanding items, some follow-up questions, some updates to forms where I sent out not the updated form. So I thought it would be a good idea just to go over some of those things from the December webinar again, and then provide some additional updates, reminders, and things that we can look forward to in 2024. And now when you see some of these screens, when I say look forward to, I don't mean necessarily something we're excited about, but something that is coming in the future. We are looking forward into the future, and there are things that aren't going to get out of our way. So we're going to talk about those. And again, before I begin with the content, we are monitoring the Q&A. We've turned off chat. Again, chat becomes very overwhelming and hard to follow. And so we are going to monitor the Q&A portion. Okay, and let's get started. So one of the updates from the December webinar was our discussion for those of you who administer or manage project-based vouchers in project-based buildings. We have said in December that we are committed to clearing those project-based to tenant-based wait lists that agencies have been maintaining. Just a quick reminder, back in April of 2023, we were identified by HUD as a housing authority that was projected to end the year in a budget shortfall. And so when that happens, HUD more or less takes over our program administration, particularly in the Housing Choice Voucher program. And some of the stipulations that we have to agree to when we are in a projected shortfall is we will not issue new vouchers because new vouchers end up costing money and impacting the budget. So what happened was, even with those individuals who are in their project-based unit for at least a year and were eligible to apply for a tenant-based voucher, in non-shortfall years, we say you get the next available voucher. But because we were in a shortfall for almost the entire year of 2023, none of those wait lists were satisfied by folks moving to a tenant-based voucher. We have committed, since we have started 2024, we're not yet projected to be in a budget shortfall because we don't have our final budget yet. That's in a couple more slides. We'll talk about that. So since we're not, we wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to clear those wait lists. So just a couple bullet points here. Each agency with a project-based voucher program should be maintaining their own project-based to tenant-based wait list. What we would like you all to do is, if you have not already done so, share those wait lists with your SPOC, and then work with your SPOC to coordinate a voucher issuance plan. When we say voucher issuance plan, that could look different for everybody. Some agencies have multiple project-based buildings with hundreds and hundreds of participants. Maybe not all on the wait list to get a tenant-based voucher, but some wait lists could be rather long. And then some agencies may just have one project-based building, and so don't have any or many individuals on that wait list to receive a tenant-based voucher. So what we don't want to do is say, okay, agency A, you have 62 people on your project-based to tenant-based wait list, issue all those vouchers today, bring them in for a briefing, do all of that work, because that's going to be overwhelming. So what we would ask is just you work with your SPOC, you coordinate a plan that works best for your agency to get those individuals their tenant-based vouchers issued in a LEAP. We do have a suggested deadline for completion, which is happy leap year, February 29th of 2024, and earlier if preferred. So that's just over a month. And when we say completion, we mean that the voucher has been issued and the briefing was completed by February 29th. Why February 29th? Well, in good years, our budgets have been released around early March. And so should this be one of those good years, we could be projected to be in a budget shortfall in early March based on however the budget shakes out. So we would like agencies to prioritize these voucher issuances so that we can get them out on the street searching. Should HUD have to come in and commandeer our program again, we can have those vouchers already issued so they aren't at risk for another year of us not being able to issue vouchers from the project-based to tenant-based waitlist. So that was an update to a comment I made last month regarding what we would like to do before the final budgets come out for 2024. So again, work with your SPOC and just to coordinate that voucher issuance plan. Very important also to share your wait lists. So we want to make sure that we are issuing the vouchers equitably, meaning those who applied first should be the first to receive the voucher. And so we want to make sure we have access to that should we be audited by HUD on that process. Okay, I've got some stuff in my way here. The next update comes with HUD and DOH reports. If you have not already, you may be contacted by DOH regarding participants that HUD had identified through what they call drill down reports. So, and again, this is specific to HCV, and let me go back. Nope, let me go back. There we go. The project-based to tenant-based voucher information is specific to HCV. I do have questions out to the CAT team and the OHI team, and I don't see that they're on the call this morning on what that might look like for state housing vouchers, for community access team vouchers, for homeless solution programs vouchers, any of those that have project-based vouchers that are not HCV. So if there are SHV, state housing voucher, or CAT, community access team, project-based vouchers, this slide does not necessarily apply because those programs were not in a shortfall. So I don't believe their processes were impacted in 2023, but without clarification on what those processes are, I'm going to wait and talk to the relevant staff in those programs, and I will send a follow-up to this webinar with the processes for the non-HCV, the non-housing choice voucher, project-based to tenant-based voucher issuances. Okay, so again, HUD and DOH reports. So again, with our projected budget shortfall in 2023, HUD provided us many tools in our monthly meetings with them to show us where we could cut the fat, you know, for lack of a better term, with our budget. Where are we spending more than maybe we should be? And they do this through many tools. One of them is a drill down report. And that drill down report shows us a lot of different data points. So for example, households that have zero income reported, but have a rent portion due. They want us to ask, how on earth are they paying that rent portion? Could it be possible that they have income they forgot to report. And in some of those cases, they had income, but based on our interim policy, we weren't required to report it. Or perhaps they had earned income disregard, so they were at 100% of their income being disregarded. There were some different examples, but in the cases where we couldn't see a clear reason why somebody with zero income with a rent portion hasn't been posted or potentially evicted, we have reached out, or we will be reaching out to your agencies to get some additional information. So again, you may have already heard from us, or you may be hearing from us, particularly as we get updated drill down reports in the future. And a couple other examples, households with zero income with childcare expenses, with medical expenses. They want us to ask those questions. How are you paying these expenses when you are reporting zero income? So just some basic program quality questions. And then there's also a big report, a big tool called the income validation tool that we are just starting to dig into. And this is provided in EIV. However, because we are a large housing authority, but we do the work through just over 50 agencies across the state, we can get the large list from HUD on individuals who have income reported through the Department of Labor, but who are not reporting that income in ELITE for whatever reason. So HUD can provide us this list using the income validation tool. And that list is hundreds of participants long. The problem with our setup is that we can't tell by this list which agency each of these individuals belong to. So it requires quite a bit of research on our end. And so we're just digging into what that might look like, how we can simplify that process so that we can provide that to you and you can reach out to families. Again, if people are underreporting or not reporting income, our HAP portion is higher. So when we're spending more on HAP, we get closer to going over our budget. In situations where we shouldn't be paying as high of HAP, HUD requires that we get that HAP back. And that is generally through repayment agreements or corrective actions to actions in ELITE. So just to sort of avoid a lot of the negative connotations that come with repayment agreements or backdated actions, we wanted to get ahead of it, but it just requires a little staff time. So again, two different examples of where you may be hearing from DOH staff if any of your participants fall in these reports. And just another, I suppose it's more of a reminder than an update, but we have a lot of late inspections that are being reported to HUD. I think we're still playing a pretty fierce game of catch up from COVID, which is a valid reason in many cases. But when HUD tells us COVID was almost 4 years ago, first of all, I don't believe them because I'm still in my basement working. But they're right. It was, we had time to right the ship. And so ELITE does offer an upcoming HQS reporter or some sort of report that lists out all the late inspections. And you should be receiving these from your spot. So we ask that when you receive these, you please review them and double check if the income is or the information is correct on those reports. Perhaps it'll say the last inspection was done in 2019, but you have done an inspection in the meantime, and maybe it just didn't get processed correctly in ELITE or missed. We need to be able to get our late inspection percentage way down. That was our one CMAP indicator. CMAP, again, our assessment, our annual assessment back to HUD on our program performance. That was the one indicator where we lost points on because we had so many late inspections. And so we would prefer not to lose points in this next year on our CMAP so we can get our report card up a little bit. You know, we get $1 for every A, right? So we want to make sure we get, that was a joke. about the 80s and how I would get $1 for every A. But we don't necessarily get paid for being high performers, but we would be overlooked for future funding opportunities if our performance isn't high enough on that CMAP every year. So this is something we would like to have agencies commit to this year, early in the year, drilling down on those late inspections, providing corrected information if the information in ELITE is not correct or not reporting out correctly, and then getting those inspections completed so that we can be up to date. So we do have a question from Shauna that says, do you have a list of all the different vouchers of how often inspections need to be done? I do believe that is on our program comparison sheet, Shauna, that we have online. I don't know if somebody can share a link to that. But it is spelled out on which programs inspections need to be done annually and which need to be done biennially. And I will give you a sneak peek of one of our upcoming slides regarding the Inspire inspections. And that is once the Inspire protocol is implemented, all inspections will be annually, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, however you look at it. But the biennial inspection will be no more, and that is set to be implemented later this year. But it looks like Kimberly may have shared a link to that comparison chart. Okay. So a reminder, and this is again a rollover from last month. The Department of Local Affairs, the Colorado Department of Local Affairs, or we call ourselves DOLA. We have a new executive director, Maria DeCambra. She was the executive director officially on December 15th, 2023. And so we have shared new HAP contract templates. And yes, last month I did share 2 incorrect ones, and I do apologize for that oversight. But we do have new HAP contract templates on our website. And if they are not there yet, they will be soon, for the HCV program, the Permanent Supportive Housing Program, the State Housing Voucher Program, and for manufactured home or lot rent. I also provided those as attachments in the email I sent this morning. And so just a reminder, effective December 15th, 2023, if there are any HAP contracts that were executed on that date and later, it must have Maria's name printed on the HAP contract. This is important because Rick Garcia no longer had signature authority on that date. And so those HAP contracts would be deemed invalid without his name on them, or if his name is on them and Maria's name is not on them. So just a reminder on that important update to our HAP contracts. A reminder about budget timelines. We've had, so we have 2 check runs every month, with the exception of December when we did not do a housing choice voucher mid-month check run. But in a normal month, we have 2 check runs each month. And after each of those check runs are processed in ELITE and before they are paid out of our state accounting system, we have to meet with the accounting team at DOLA, and they go through all of the payments to look for inconsistencies, potential errors, really large amounts that would tip off an auditor. And of course, we have large units, and so that isn't always an issue. But what they saw and what we presented on in April of 2023, but they are seeing again an uptick in HAP payments that span HAP and utility assistance payments that span several months. So not just this month and the prior month. And so just a reminder that moves and new admissions, particularly, must be submitted and finalized in Elite so that payment is received by the landlord no later than 60 days from the effective date. That's a requirement that is spelled out in the HAP contract, that the first payment that the landlord receives will not be more than 60 days from the effective date. And that gives us time just to make sure the W-9 is accurate, that we have all the lease documents, everything is in order. And that language in the HAP contract comes from a HUD regulation. So we don't have the ability to really be approving these actions when a move is processed 6 months later. We're doing it because it's critical that our families who were moved into that unit 6 months ago aren't asked to leave because we can't make the payment. But what's happening as we've completed our January, both of our January check runs, is that accounting is seeing this trend again, where we're going back 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, and paying a lot of money in the month of January. So again, for example, we do budget projections every month. That's what HUD looks at, and what HUD will come back to us and say, hey, based on your projections of what you've spent in January and then what you spent in February, you're on pace to be in shortfall again. And of course, they take over our program and a lot of things change that aren't fun. But what's happening kind of behind the scenes is that we might have had 9 months worth of payments for 2 people that moved in and we were waiting on a lease, or we just found the paperwork on our desk, or for whatever reason. So we have really huge payments in January that make our spending in January sort of off the charts. And it's not accurate. It's not an accurate reporting. So we just really want to push this reminder on the timelines. And again, if you have moves or new admissions that you know will be completed beyond that deadline, please reach out to your SPOC so we can at least have a heads up to share with accounting. So I see a question. What if we are having issues getting the W-9 on each move? Is there a way, if they are set up with DOH, that we can move forward without another copy since they are good for a year? So that's a great suggestion / question, Leslie. We do ask for a W-9 on each move or new admission. That was asked of us by the Office of the State Controller in return for one of our staff being allowed to create vendors in the core system. It's unusual for a state agency or a state division to directly create vendors in the state accounting system because of how all of the financial implications that fall on that responsibility. But because we also submit to the Office of the State Controller, I don't know, 100 new W-9s every month, that might even be a lowball estimate. They realized they couldn't help us. They couldn't get those W-9s entered fast enough. So now Jamie Hensley, our program assistant, many of you know, is able to directly create those vendors in core. But in return, we promise that we're getting W-9s every time. Now, that said, if you have a move and the only thing holding it up is we do not have the W-9 from the landlord, but we know, I think we're paying this landlord already. We can research in core to make sure we have an active W-9 on file, and then possibly move that through, but still work to get that W-9. That's a case-by-case situation that we ask that you reach out to your SPOC on that. All right. So this is a reminder. I think we briefly touched on this last month as well, on the new HUD release form. The HUD 9886, the Privacy Act release of information HUD form we've been using for a very long time, is no more. So effective January 1st, 2024, HUD has now provided what's called the HUD 9886-A form. It is essentially the same information being given. The participants are giving us permission to access the same kind of information using this form. However, a big change to this form is once it is signed by an adult, it does not need to be signed again. It is good for the rest of their time in the program. So, let me just read the bullet point that I gave myself. After implementation, once a participant has signed the new form, they will not need to sign and submit subsequent forms except when someone who is 18 years or older is added to the household. If a family member in the household turns 18 since coming onto the program, then that family member would need to sign the existing HUD 9886-A form that's already in the file, or as required by HUD or the PHA in administrative instructions. So basically, whenever HUD says, we can get it signed again. And so I think the guidance we gave was start using this form. It is on our website. I did provide it as well in the email. Start using this form today. Hopefully you started using it last month for all of your annual re-exams, new admissions, moves, whatever actions you're doing with your families. I couldn't read, or I couldn't find in the regs where we have to go back if we've already done our, which we really should have by now, our January re-exams, our February re-exams, our March re-exams. Some of you are working on your Aprils. I don't think it is necessary to go back and get the form replaced. We can do these moving forward. But if you would like to, we can provide you a list of all of your completed annuals, starting with the effective date of January 1st moving forward, so you can send these forms out to your households to get them signed. It may just be easier when you meet with them or when you send out the new paperwork packets for upcoming re-exams, just to have them sign it at that time. But what's really important when these forms come back to you is that all adult household members have signed it. If all adult household members have signed the form it no longer needs to be submitted or sent out in re-exam packets. No harm, no foul if it is. They can sign it more than once, but just know it's not required to be signed more than once. Now, as we start to see more new admissions, fingers crossed, in 2024, getting this form signed at the time of voucher briefing covers your bases for the rest of the time that households are on the program. And as I mentioned before, that original form, that original HUD 9886-A form that might be signed in 2024, if household members turn 18 in 2026, you can just go back and pull that original form and have the family members who've turned 18 sign it. A new form is not required. So again, this form is on our website. If you would like to work backwards to get this completed by all your households who have had a new admission, a move, an annual re-exam that was effective January 1st and later, reach out to your SPOC and we can work on getting those reports so you have something to work on. But again, I don't think it's critical. I think as long as starting today, hopefully last month, like I said, but starting today, replace your HUD 9886 with the HUD 9886-A because this is the form that's effective January 1st. All right, reminders about reasonable accommodation and criminal background check denials. If you are running a criminal background check on a new participant in the program, or if someone's adding a participant or an adult to their household and you're running those CBIs and something shows up on the CBI and you're not sure it would be something that would pass, it is not on you all to make that determination if the CBI should be approved or denied. If you have a question about what you are seeing on the CBI or on the criminal background report, it must come into the SPOC to make that final determination. This is a process we put in place because what we found many years ago was that across the board, people were not understanding how the arrests and possible convictions were entered into CBI. Those reports can be very confusing. Kimberly and I went to CBI, again, many years ago, and had them show us how to read the reports because they were confusing to us as well. And so with that information, we're able to confidently make a determination if, based on what we're seeing in the report, a participant should be denied or approved admission to the program, or whatever reason that you ran the CBI. We're able to make that final determination without misinterpreting the reports, if that makes sense. So just a reminder, those should come in to the SPOCs, as well as reasonable accommodation requests. We want to be able to look at all of those consistently and equitably and make sure that we are responding consistently and equitably and not reviewing it with any sort of unintentional biases that sometimes occur. And then within the Division of Housing, if a SPOC is reviewing a request and it's not clear if it's something that can be approved, it goes to a panel within the Division of Housing of the same people, so that, again, we are consistent and equitable in our responses. We provided a link to our website, just to back up to the criminal background reports. If a CBI is denied, we do have template letters available on our website at this link, where you have the language right there on what can be sent to the applicants or whomever we are denying based on their CBI. So we just wanted to provide that resource. So you're not, again, so we can be consistent and you have the right language when sending these often sensitive letters. Another reminder regarding our payment standards, they are all, with the exception of a handful of counties, have stayed the same or gone up. The new payment standards and small area FMRs are effective January 1st, 2024. So if you're doing your hand calculated 50058s to make sure a unit is affordable before a family, before we move forward with that RAFTA, make sure you're using the 2024 payment standards. We provided the link to where those are located on our website. Okay, looking forward. Again, maybe we're not looking forward to all of these changes, but they're coming, hopefully. And I say hopefully in regards to the budget, which we do not have as of today's webinar. So let me just, I cannot see what it says under there. Budget. Okay, this is regarding the Housing Choice Voucher Program, regarding our budget. So 2024 budget unknown. I have not checked the news at all today. I tend not to, in general, check the news, but I have been keeping up with what Congress is voting on in terms of the budget. I do know that there is a continuing resolution, another continuing resolution that's under consideration that the House and Senate must both vote on and approve no later than, was that Friday? Friday the 19th, or we are at risk for another government shutdown. Not that a government shutdown has happened, but we are in another risk for a government shutdown, which just seems to continue to happen. If this existing continuing resolution is passed by both houses or by both chambers, we will be funded based on 2023 amounts through March 1st, 2024. What that means is we just continue business as usual. HUD's paying us based on what we spent in 2023. We don't know if our budget's going to go up or down. So we try to be a little conservative with our spending in these first few months, should the budget be slashed, which again, if you've been on this ride with us, has happened. About 10 years ago, we had a very large budget slash called sequestration, where we weren't really anticipating it, and then all federal budgets were cut significantly. So we were really working our way out of that in 2013. So business as usual. Again, please prioritize the project-based to tenant-based wait lists. We want to get those vouchers out on the street. Just in, the chance that our budget doesn't come back favorable, we want to be able to have some folks out there searching before they shut down our voucher issuance. Sorry, it's the winter and the virus again has come for my entire family. But regarding the 2024 budgets, there are two proposed budgets, the House budget and the Senate budget for 2024 for HUD. Notwithstanding the continuing resolution, all that does is give us 2023 level funding to cover our bills in early 2024. But the new budget, both of the proposals do not fund the Housing Choice Voucher Program when you consider the increased FMRs and the increased rents across the country. So right now, if the worst it could be is that we have to attrition 112,000 housing choice vouchers from the program. And that's in the worst case scenario. The best case budget scenario is that 80,000 vouchers would be lost. So not a really huge improvement. And what that means, not that people with vouchers will lose their vouchers, but again, we can't turn over vouchers as they come off the program based on these two proposed budgets. So until we have the final voted on and approved by the president budget, we don't know what we're working with. We hope that all of the shortfall work we did in 2023 will put us in a very good position in 2024. Remains to be seen. So again, prioritize your project-based to tenant-based wait lists and get those issued before we know what's up with our budgets. And when we do know what's up with our budgets, I will let everybody know, of course. More looking forward, elites. We have a new projected go live date. I think every month in our webinar, we'll have maybe a new projected go live date. This one feels good though, mid-February, with the new host. That doesn't mean everything transitions over to the new host in mid-February. It just means our system will be up and running, and we can start doing our check runs and such through that system. We have, again, as a reminder, 150 licenses. That is what was in our budget for this new host. That's the initial portal. So right now, those of you who have Elite Access know you log into the Colorado Department of Human Services portal for that first level of entry to access Elite. The Colorado Department of Human Services can no longer host our data. We are just too large in terms of all of the data, the server space required to maintain it. We've been very fortunate that the Department of Human Services has allowed us to be on their platform since 2002. And they did that because, if some of you may remember, there was a housing authority called Supportive Housing and Homeless Programs, or SHIP, that was housed under CDHS. That's where a couple of us transferred over from. And so, of course, they were hosting our data. They were the department that that we worked for. But when we came over to the Division of Housing in DOLA, they continued to support us. We've just gotten too big, so they can't. and they've given us a lot of notice, and we've worked really hard to get our new host set up. And it's just because we're so big, because we have a unique user system where we have contracted agencies across the state. It's been a complex process. So that said, CDHS, who is offering their platform for free, can no longer host us. We need to use a Microsoft product called Azure to host us, and that's not free. And you probably know that Microsoft makes a lot of money, and this is how. And so we were limited with our budget to 150 licenses. We have been working with many of you on identifying the main users to get things set up. I know several of you have worked with Stephanie Casillas or are scheduled to do so. And thank you for making yourselves available to get this new system installed and to test your access. The next step for those who have been identified in this initial 150 licenses is that we have to complete a stress test. What that means is at least 60%, I believe, if not more, of the 150 users have to all log in on the same day at the same time for at least an hour, where we just do things in Elite. It's a testing environment, so whatever we do during this time does not impact our program, but they want us to do a mock check run. They want us to process interims. They want us to process new admissions, enter people on a waiting list, enter notes, print letters, those kinds of things, to see if the amount of bandwidth we require is available in this new platform. So on this screen, excuse me, there are 4 possible dates and times where this stress test will take place. We have not heard back from Mphasis Elite on which of these dates works best for them. My preferred date is the very last one, January 31st. But once we have confirmed the date that Mphasis can do this test with us, we ask that those of you identified, and you will receive a separate email with these licenses, please make yourself available to do the stress test. Without the stress test results, we cannot go live. And so if you could at this time save the date, I know some of those dates are next week, and that may not be realistic. Again, why I pushed for the January 31st. Put this on your calendar. We will know when that actual date is, and we will send an email out to those of you who are identified as one of the 150 licenses. Now, will we be able to add more licenses? Maybe. We are not sure what is left in the budget we were given for transitioning over to this new host. What I do know is we're going from paying $0 a year for hosting to a lot of dollars a year for hosting. And so that's going to have quite an impact on funding, not for vouchers, but just an impact on our administrative funding. And so the more licenses we add, the more it costs. So we're trying a couple different avenues on if there are different levels of users. So maybe you have somebody at your agency who would only be accessing Elite to process inspections or to print letters because they're in your administrative office. Could we get a blended rate for those kinds of licenses? And we haven't heard back on that yet. So stay tuned. We may have an ability to add more licenses to this 150, but for now, just so we can get to that go live, we have to start with what we have been approved for. Oh, I just don't want to do these next few slides because these are the things I am not looking forward to, but they're coming. The next few groupings of slides, we're going to briefly touch on HotMop and Nspire. Two massive freight trains heading in our direction. We got away from them in 2023, but now we have 2024 deadlines, and it's 2024. So I can't ignore it anymore. So let's start with HOTMA. What we do know, it is the Housing Opportunities Through Modernization Act that initially came out in 2016. There were many sections to HOTMA that HUD needed to implement through this legislation. And they have implemented all of it except for sections 102, 103, and 104. Now, section 103 does not apply to the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Again, this is the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Sorry, I keep meaning to say that in the beginning. This is legislation regarding the Housing Choice Voucher and public housing programs. We do not have a public housing program at the Division of Housing, and section 103 applies to the public housing program, so we're not going to talk about that. But we do need to finalize the last two sections and implement them. And that's sections 102 and 104. As I mentioned, they do apply to HCV, and that's the purpose of the legislation. However, because we try to be consistent across all of our programs, many of these updates and policies will likely be implemented across all of our programs when possible. Some of them might be in opposition to the mission of other programs, and so we wouldn't be able to adopt them. But where we can, we would like to streamline these updates to all programs. The implementation deadline for HOTMA is January 1st, 2025. But housing authorities can select an implementation date anytime between now and January 1st of 2025. We have not at DOH selected an implementation date as of yet. Part of that is because there are so many changes in sections 102 and 104 to the very fundamentals of the Housing Choice Voucher Program that require admin plan updates, public hearing, software, intense software updates, a new 50058 form, which HUD has published, new regs. I mean, this is huge. And so, fortunately, I say with a question, the implementation date went from January 1st of 2024 to January 1st of 2025. A big key component of that was that the software, especially Emphasis Elite and Yardi, the two largest software providers, could not get their systems into compliance with all these changes by the time frame given in the initial legislation. So we can't choose an implementation date until we know Emphasis Elite is ready, and they're not right now. So, which is fine because we're not ready anyway. I'm gonna provide just a very basic overview of the changes that are coming, but do know that we will be providing more training later in the year once we have an understanding of these changes ourselves. A few of us have attended some HOTMA multi-day trainings where I questioned a lot of my choices in life and what my future might look like. And so I think a few of us will have to take a couple more trainings to feel confident in the changes that are about to be rolled out. But here at this link at the bottom of this slide, if you are interested, I think it's like a 67-page notice that's available. You can see what those changes are in legislation. And then there will be plenty of tools to talk about just kind of summary of what those changes look like. There will be calculators, there will be calendars, there will be a lot of the changes have to be slowly implemented. So, at 50% this year, 100% next year, a lot of tracking. And Elite, or the software system used by public housing authorities, has to be able to do that tracking and to print those letters that let people know where they are in the process, because that it just can't be done manually. And I think that's a big holdup. So let's get into it. Section 103. Oops, see, I've already screwed up. It should be section 102 because section 103 is for public housing only. My bad. So section 102, I'll correct this before I post the materials on the website. Income reviews. So here are just a couple summarized changes that are coming with HOTMA in section 102. And HUD promotes this as administrative burden, lessening the administrative burden, making the program easier for participants. I do believe at the end of it all, it will do those things, but during the implementation year or years, it's going to be not less administratively burdensome, let's just put it that way. But I think the end result is that we will feel that burden lifted if we survive it, which we will. So fewer interim re-exams, 10%, there's going to be a 10% adjusted income increase or decrease threshold before an interim needs to be conducted. Now, in our last admin plan in 2023, we were very excited to finally change our interim policy to be a little less restrictive, to give households the opportunity when they start a new job to not feel that impact, so they can maybe feel the benefit of maintaining employment without the penalty of your rent going up right away. So we said we made a really great change to our interim policy on, if you start earning income and you weren't at zero income in your household, but you start a job, we're not going to count it till your next annual. Make sure you report it, but we're not going to count it. We were so excited about that. And then the HOTMA regs came out immediately afterwards and said, nope, it has to be a 10%. So it's going to be a change from what we think is an awesome interim policy that says if there is a 10% income increase or decrease, then an interim has to be conducted for non-wage income. No, don't quote me on that. What it boils down to is that in most cases, increase in earned income would not be processed until the next re-exam based on that threshold. In our case, it never would have, but because of HOTMA, we're going to have to adjust our interim policy. Again, the implementation date is not set. We'll talk about our admin plan effective dates here in a couple slides. This is just a heads up that interim policy is going to change a little bit, look a little bit different, require a lot of calculations and tracking, but again, something that our software should be able to get into compliance to do for us. Another impact in section 102 is going to be streamlined verifications. So again, that HUD 9886-A, the adults will only need to sign that form one time. HUD's like, great, this is going to streamline a lot for you guys. Now, they still have to do all the other paperwork, so does it really streamline? No, but it does give us that authorization to run the EIV, to run other income reports, to reach out to employers, to get tax returns if we need them. And we don't have to get it signed every year to access that. Again, when families refuse to sign the form for whatever reason, HUD says if they refuse to sign the 9886, we can't assist them anymore. That's a non-negotiable form. So this kind of takes away that possible frustrating conversation we might have with some of our participants. They can revoke it at any time. It does, not allow us to continue to assist them, but they can revoke that release. But HUD's calling that release needing to be signed one time a streamlined verification, which it is. With HOTMA, we can now use income determinations from other programs, from other federal benefits programs used for re-exams. So if the food stamp office, for example, or the Medicaid office, or other programs that access a household's income information to determine the benefits that they could receive. If it's a federal benefit program, and I don't know how we're going to be able to access the food stamp paperwork, for example, that the families provided to the food stamp office, but if there's some way, maybe with HOTMA, that we will have this open line of communication with other federal programs that they can provide us with income verifications, we can use that in the HCB program. And then the EIV not being required at interim reexaminations is a change with HOTMA. Another change, and you'll see on the next slide how I'm not sure that this is necessarily a benefit, but they are increasing the standard deduction for elderly and disabled households. That's where the head, the co-head, or the spouse of a household is a person with a disability or a person who is 62 years and older. Right now, they get a $400 deduction for that status. That deduction is increasing to $525. I mean, that is good. But the thought process behind increasing that deduction, other than it's been a really long time and the cost of living has gone up, so perhaps the deductions should also go up, is that, well, on the next slide, you'll see they're also increasing the threshold for medical expenses and making medical expense deductions a little bit more complex. So I think the alternative to that is, well, it's going to be harder for you to count medical expenses, so in return, we'll just increase this deduction to give you that benefit of a little bit higher deduction. Again, sorry, section 102, income reviews, what I was just discussing. And I'm not an expert. Oh, I should have started this with I'm not an expert. I've attended a couple trainings and I still have a lot of questions. We will have more information when we would provide the training to everybody later in the year. But the threshold for claiming medical and disability expenses has increased. So right now, for households who are considered disabled households where the head, the co-head, or spouse is a person with a disability, we are able to deduct medical expenses for everybody in the household if they exceed 3% of the household's annual income. So anything in excess of that 3% threshold, we can count as a medical expense deduction. That threshold is now increasing to 10%. And it will be phased in over 2 years. This is a tracking nightmare that our software will be able to do for us. I don't know how this positively impacts our families. I just don't. And I don't know why they're advertising it that way, because our households, and you guys know, we identify our vouchers or prioritize our vouchers mostly to people with disabilities. And so a lot of our households do have medical expenses that they deduct, and it is a lot of work, but maybe there are going to be fewer of those medical expense deductions with this increase. So again, I'm not seeing how this impacts our households positively necessarily. Now they do go on to include a hardship relief that allows the PHAs to offer more in terms of medical expenses. It provides hardship relief for expense deductions, lessening the impact of the increased threshold for medical expenses. HOTMA is going to permit housing authorities to grant hardship relief to these families who are unable to pay rent because of medical and disability expenses. Again, Lynn can probably commiserate with me. When they talked about this in the Nan McKay training we attended, I don't think anyone in that training understood the benefits and what this looked like. So I think there's going to be a bit more information about how we can give our households who right now are eligible for in some cases, rather high medical expense deductions, how they can continue to receive that benefit. And I think it does have to do with this hardship relief, but it feels like it's going to be a little bit more of an administrative burden. Stay tuned. And then another update is the Earned Income Disregard program is being eliminated. And I think that was, and in return, we have the income interim policy that will give everybody an opportunity to experience an increase in earned income before their rent is impacted, rather than EID, which only offers that to people with disabilities. So that program officially sunsets or ends January 1st of 2025, which means that no new enrollments can start in that program. So if you have people who are working for the first time, we're no longer going to enter EID in Elite. And perhaps that does not impact a lot of you, because I do believe the SPOCs were handling that on DOH's end. But that program is going away. And so those were just a couple of the things yet to come in section 102 of HOTMA. And we also have section 104 of HOTMA that we have to implement, and that is regarding asset limits. So some of these, I guess, do make sense, and I think many of us may have had this question in the past. There is now going to be an asset limitation of $100,000 for households to be eligible and to continue to receive assistance. Their assets cannot exceed $100,000. And then families will also be considered ineligible for assistance if they own real property that is suitable for them to live in. We do have a couple households that own property and rent it out. And so that's a head scratcher. Why wouldn't you just live in that property yourself instead of get a voucher? You know, and in the past it was allowed, but moving forward, that won't be allowed. I really don't think this is a huge impact to our program. I think in other housing authorities where the focus isn't on individuals that have family members with disabilities or other highly vulnerable populations, we don't see a lot of people who are homeowners. And then there's some VAWA implications as well. Sometimes in a relationship split, both parties may be listed as a homeowner on a home title, but one of those individuals is not currently living in the unit because of a domestic violence situation. So there are some stipulations to this where you could be considered a homeowner, but for obvious reasons, you cannot safely live in that home. VAWA allows for us to bypass this requirement. So that more guidance forthcoming on that. Exclusion of retirement and educational savings accounts. So think like the College Invest that families use to save money for their children. And then certain retirement programs which have been counted as assets in the past will not be counted moving forward. And that's just because they're self-sufficiency assets. And it's counterintuitive when people are trying to save to become more self-sufficient, then they're being penalized by us counting those assets as income-bearing assets. So that will go away. And then this is a rather big change. Any assets that are under $50,000 can be self-certified instead of getting verification from the asset holders. So that's a pretty big change. Right now it's $5,000. Anything under $5,000 can be self-certified. That's going to increase to $50,000. I would say any questions on HOTMA, but I don't think I'm in a good space to answer them because it makes me a little nervous that there's some huge changes to, I mean, just simply the way we do the calculations that we've always done a certain way. There's going to be a big learning curve. And so I do look forward to any guidance that HUD can provide. And again, we will be providing training, but if you kind of poke around on HUD's website and you just look up HOTMA or Inspire, which we're about to talk about, they do have some webinars that they've hosted if you're curious and just want to hear what they have to say. The onus is not on you all to get certified and learn these things. The onus is on us, and then we will share that training with you. Okay, so Leslie asks, will we get these changes in writing, like action alerts when they start? At the very least, action alerts. Yes, there's going to be a lot. We're going to have sweeping updates to our admin plan at the end of the year. There's going to be webinars. There's going to be process sheets. There's going to be a lot of tools because we're going to need them as well. These are huge changes to the Housing Choice Voucher Program. So yes, once we are confident and our software is ready and we can commit to an implementation date, our plan is to have everyone ready before that date, well before that date. And then we're just gonna stumble through and figure it all out together. And maybe HUD will surprise us and push the implementation date to 2026. I don't know. We'll see. I do know that the software companies are could be a key help in that. If they just can't get the systems to do it, we can't move forward with it until such time that the systems can support it. Maybe a silly question, but when you say any asset under 5,000 doesn't need to have verification provided, does that mean we do not need bank statements at interims annuals? That's a great question. I'd need to dig into the HOTMA a little bit, but I think right now the process is you can self-certify an asset under $5,000, but every 3 years, I think HUD's requirement is that you get some sort of verification from a bank or the asset holder. And so, and to us, and because we're not just a housing authority where all of the employees work in the same building and we can have staff meetings and remind people, because we are statewide and we rely on all of you with your own caseloads and your own systems in place, we don't generally say every 3 years verify it with the bank, because that's a lot of tracking. Well, this person I verified in 2021, but this person was in 2022. So we say it's good practice just to get that bank statement every year. If the household doesn't provide the bank statement 1 year, but they have wrote on their family reporting form what their assets are, we can consider that a self-certification, and it allows the file to pass an audit. So with this new requirement of 50,000 or less, my assumption is that they will say the same thing. They can self-certify, but every 3 years you have to get paperwork. And we'll just look at what that looks like administratively on our end and on your end, if it makes sense to do it that way. But in those cases where they just can't get that retirement account, well, that's a bad example because that's going away, but like a bank statement or a trust document, we do have that to fall back on, that it really doesn't need to be fully verified, but every 3 years. Correct, Rosalie. And that's why never hold up an annual re-exam for a missing bank statement, because we have this opportunity that they can self-certify that. And then we just really need that bank statement every 3 years for sure. Exactly. So we can come up with ways that these new HOTMA requirements can be streamlined that make the most sense for everybody. Again, knowing that you all do business sometimes very differently than others. We can provide different ways to do these things, knowing that it might look different agency by agency. Okay, Inspire. Fortunately, we have 2 staff who have volunteered to be the Inspire experts. But unfortunately, we can't get into an Inspire training to save our lives because every other housing authority in America is taking those seats, because this is a very big change as well. So we will have experts on our staff, but for now, what I can provide you is just, some overviews of what's coming. So what's Inspire? Let's start there. It's the national standards for the physical inspection of real estate. Inspire, not Inspire, Inspire. This is HUD's. HUD's been beta testing this for several years. So while it feels very new and shocking to a lot of us, they have put a lot of thought into this. And so I am excited for this. I, again, am not excited for the rollout and the stumbles and the technology requirements, but I am very excited for the end result. This is a unified inspection protocol for all assisted housing units. So right now, for example, HUD funds low-income housing tax credits. HUD funds housing choice vouchers, project-based vouchers, public housing, RAD, home dollars used to develop buildings. There are a lot of different HUD funding sources in a lot of different units across the country. And those HUD funded sources, oh, I'm saying that wrong, those HUD funding sources have different inspection requirements. For some, it requires the REAC inspection, that's for your tax credits. Others, it requires the UPCS inspection, that's your public housing. For the voucher programs, it requires the HQS, or the Housing Quality Standards. All of these inspections are trying to accomplish the same thing, but are doing it very differently. And the end question that HUD has for any building property unit it funds is this a safe, secure, habitable place for families to live? With all these different inspection protocols, with human beings doing the inspections, there is so much opportunity for interpretation. One inspector might see something and say, that's a fail. Another inspector might come in and say, that is not a fail. It's just not as consistent as it should be. So HUD has designed Inspire. And Inspire is the inspection protocol that will be used by every HUD assisted housing unit. And that implementation date is October 1st. It was October 1st, 2023. So again, we've got an extension because it's a huge change. Much like HOTMA, we have not selected our implementation date for when Inspire will go live. A big component of that is that our software system is not yet compliant with Inspire. And so we don't have the tools to do the inspection. And again, like HOTMA, we will provide training. And then, like our HQS right now, we're going to have to certify you all to be HOTMA, and not HOTMA, to be Inspire inspectors for the Division of Housing. With HQS and in the future with Inspire, the certification that we provide to you all is only for you to inspect DOH units. It does not count as a certification for other units, just to clarify that. But we will have new training material, we'll have a new test. And then I've also provided a link here for HUD's Inspire page, just like HOTMA, if you're interested and want to poke around and see all of the interesting things that are out there regarding Inspire. I wanted to give you that tool. So before I go to the next slide, not a question, but there are guidebooks available and they are not very pricey and they are very helpful. Inspire V, the HQS replacement, and then the Inspire U, I think that means UPCS replacement. If agencies want to get a glance at it, Leslie said she got them. They're in color with examples. Leslie, did you get those? Okay. From HUD? Or you went on HUD's website to find those, I imagine? I think those are probably available on HUD's website, HUD and the UPCS website. Thank you, Leslie, for that resource. I appreciate that. And yes, for those of you who like a tangible book to look through, that's how I like to learn. That's going to be a good resource for you. HUD also has a lot of these things on their website, but it's clicking, and you can't, or you can take your laptop with you to read. I suppose you could in this day and age. So yeah, there's just a lot. Now I say UPC, or not UPCS, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, my brain. Inspire is going to be the universal protocol for all HUD programs, but like Leslie mentioned, Inspire-V, there's going to be specific things that you look for in a checklist for a voucher program that's going to look a little different from a public housing unit. And those checklists I did provide as one of the handouts in the email this morning, what that checklist looks like for the voucher program, if you're curious. So again, UPCS is going to consolidate elements of both HQS. Did I say this again? I'm sorry. Inspire is going to consolidate elements of HQS and UPCS inspections to consistently evaluate HUD housing across multiple programs. I keep saying UPCS because several years ago that was going to be replacing HQS. And so we were getting excited. I think Mickey, our inspector, even attended some UPCS trainings and got certified because that was going to be the new HQS. And then they scrapped that for the voucher program for Inspire. So I apologize. I keep misspeaking. I feel like I've done many of these trainings and nothing has come of it. So I don't know if that means Inspire will be delayed, but we'll see. Although I don't think it will because it's gone live in multifamily in July of 2023. So it's that train that's coming at us full speed. Leslie, I don't think she provided a link. She said it was on the HUD website. Leslie, if you have the ability to provide us that link, that would be awesome. No pressure. So with Inspire, there are 3 categories of physical deficiencies that we are scoring. That's going to be for health and safety, for function and operability, and then finally for condition and appearance. I will say a lot of the Inspire literature, that's what you can call it, that I've read, said the focus on the cosmetic is almost eliminated with Inspire, because yes, it's great if things look great, but really what's important about a unit is that it's safe, it's healthy, and it's a good place for our families to live. It might not be pretty, but if it's safe, HUD wants it to pass. And I think part of that is because with the housing stock that's available to our households right now, it's becoming less and less. And so to take away from just the cosmetic features is going to open a couple more doors for more housing opportunities for families. And then within those categories, there are going to be 3 inspectable areas that you're going to be looking at. The inside, that's the common areas or the building systems. The outside, the actual site of the building, and then the units. And of course, that's the interior of an individual's home. With the purpose of ensuring that components of those 3 areas are functionally adequate, operable, and free of health and safety hazards. That's the mission of Inspire. And Courtney says, yes, it can literally be missing drawer fronts. It sure can. The ceiling fan can be missing the pole to turn it on. And you might have to pull on 3 little tiny metal, balls on the string. In the past, that would, for some people, would have failed an inspection. That's truly an actual example. And for others, it wouldn't fail the inspection. And as the tenant who wants to move into the unit, they can decide, I don't want to live in a unit that doesn't have the pole for the ceiling fan. I just simply cannot live here. And that's their option. But if a family does not have that concern, we have the opportunity to rent that unit, right? I think that's HUD's purpose with Inspire. Okay, it's a lot of words. So for housing choice voucher and project-based voucher assisted housing, which for purposes of the Division of Housing's Inspire is what we're talking about. Inspire standards only apply to the subsidized unit itself, items and components within the primary and secondary means of exit from a unit's entry door to a public way, so the hallways, and then common areas related to residential use, such as the laundry room and the mailroom. And then the systems equipment that directly services a subsidized unit, the boiler room, the utility closet that has the furnace and the water heater, for example. So while Inspire in some situations, like a tax credit property or public housing, is going to have broader, more things to look at, the voucher Inspire form has less. So there, aren't we lucky? We don't have to do as huge of a real estate assessment. We're really just looking at the units that our households are living in and any of the common areas that our households will access. We don't have to look at the larger property, for example, like the LIHTC and the public housing inspections would have to do. Here's a bummer of a change for especially the housing choice voucher program. And that's that housing authorities will be required to conduct self-inspections, our own inspections of all units at least annually, and correct all identified deficiencies. If the property scores under 60, then we have to report it to HUD. Thank you, and Leslie just shared in the Q&A. And I'm gonna copy that, Leslie, and I'll share that out in an email as well. Excellent, thank you, Leslie. And so, yes, this change is going to require that we do inspections annually. There is a scoring system. I haven't determined, or I haven't been able to decipher the scoring system just yet. But if a unit scores under 60, there is going to be a requirement that we let HUD know, because HUD wants poor properties to be on their radar, is my understanding with Inspire. And then we have to keep records related to the inspections for up to 3 years, not up to 3 years, for at least 3 years. The deficiencies will be scored based on 2 factors: the severity of a defect and the location of the defect, such as whether it is inside the units, which is going to have a higher deficiency score inside the building, or in an outside area. So it's not even. So a deficiency within the unit's going to have more of an impact on the score than a deficiency outside of the unit, for example. So the question is, if these inspections for HCV aren't going to be biennial anymore, when do they go into effect? That change will happen as soon as Inspire is implemented, which will be no later than October 1st, 2024, as of the information we have today. And again, we'll provide what to do in terms of all the historical inspections. My guess is that once Inspire goes live, every unit that has not been inspected in the past year will have to be inspected. The 2-year rule will go away. And that's something we can provide agencies data and reports on in regards to whom in your programs will be required to have inspections once Inspire goes live. And then, so there's a lot about scoring. I hope we don't have to bring a calculator to the inspection. I couldn't find it when I was trying to get ready for this webinar, but I know I've read that this is all going to be digital. You know, you just take your little stylus and your iPad and you select I'm in the living room and here's the outlets and here's what I'm gonna say about the outlets. And then it calculates that score for you in the end. I couldn't find any information on that. I also feel like a year ago when we were learning about Inspire, there's going to be some larger database where if I did an inspection in a tax credit unit that one of my households was living in, and I did that inspection today, and I submit the score, that if somebody who's monitoring tax credit properties were to select a unit to inspect and they selected that unit, the inspection I did would count for them. And vice versa. If a tax credit property had a unit inspected for purposes of tax credit and our household happened to live in it, that would count for our inspection. I couldn't find that in the regs. I don't know if that went away or if I just wasn't looking in the right place. But if that's the case, that's awesome. And could actually decrease some of our work, but to be determined once I get a little bit more information. So the scoring categories are life-threatening, severe, moderate, and low. So when you're looking at something, you decide if it's life-threatening, high risk of death, severe illness or injury to a resident. And then, of course, they have definitions of what all these are. So you're not making that call based on your life experiences. Severe, is there a high risk of permanent disability or serious injury or illness to a resident? There are deficiencies that would seriously compromise the physical security or safety of a resident or their property. In those cases, you would score it severe. When it comes to life-threatening and severe deficiencies, the PHA or owner must correct it within 24 hours. So these are those 24-hour fails that we do in HCV with our HQS inspections. And in any life-threatening or severe deficiency, we're going to have to report to HUD within 72 hours. Hopefully on our fancy little iPads that just sends that report straight to HUD. I don't know what futuristic world I'm visualizing right now. But again, we don't have to determine what's life-threatening and severe. That's going to be provided to us on the checklist and in the literature that they're going to give us regarding these inspections. The other categories, moderate. Again, is there a moderate risk of an adverse medical event requiring a healthcare visit? It's very specific, causing temporary harm or if left untreated, causing or worsening a chronic condition that may have long-lasting adverse health effects. Well, now I am not a medical professional, so I know that HUD is going to provide us with additional information so we can make these determinations. What is an example of a moderate risk? Are we talking mold? Are we talking air quality and so on? And then another moderate definition, there are deficiencies that would compromise the physical security or safety of a resident or their property. And then there are the low scoring category. There are deficiencies critical to habitability, but they do not present a substantive health or safety risk. So those are HUD scoring criteria. Oops. I did provide you all with the Inspire checklist. I'm not going to go over that because we're running out of time. But it will give you an idea of what we are asked to look at, and it gives us an option. So there are some things that are just straight up life-threatening, and we don't have the option to say moderate or low. It will tell us if X is present, answer is life-threatening. So I thought that was really nice of that checklist that I have to understand a little more. That there are just some things we can't make a determination on. HUD already determines that for us. And Mickey, our inspector, is saying that handheld devices are optional depending on the inspection program we end up using. So again, to be determined. They sure would be nice, especially if we have inspectors like Mickey, whose job 8 to 5 every day is to do inspections. I bet that would be very handy for you, Mickey. So again, I'm really excited to see what kind of guidance and technology HUD's going to provide, or suggest for us with Inspire. Okay. So a couple more looking forwards. Colorado NARO, the annual conference is coming up. May 7th through 10th will again be held in Vail for those of you who have attended in the past. For those of you who attended in the past, especially the past few years, you probably noticed that there weren't a lot of housing choice voucher specific sessions. And I don't know why. I guess I didn't provide any feedback that would help inform conference planning in the future, so I take some responsibility for that. But this year, there is a specific housing choice voucher track with the NARO conference. And I know this because our very own Lynn Symington is chairing that track. And we have a lot of really exciting voucher specific sessions that will be at NARO this year. So just a plug, if you are interested and have training dollars that you need to spend at your agency, this conference is a great way to meet other housers across the state, to meet a lot of Division of Housing staff. A lot of us go, not just in the voucher programs. And it's in Vail in the spring, which is absolutely beautiful. It's just a really cool conference. So we just wanted to provide you with some information. And we have invited the Denver HUD office to present sessions on both HOTMA and Inspire, which I will be in attendance in both of those, taking a lot of notes. So just another opportunity for learning a bit more on these big changes that are coming. And another looking forward, we have our admin plan. Every year it's effective on May 1st. And this year it will be effective on May 1st, 2024. However, what's different this year with our administrative plan is that we are going to have to update it again later in the year. Now, if I was on top of it and had a better understanding of HOTMA and Inspire, I could roll those changes into the May 1st admin plan that we're going to publish, and then say, but with the implementation date of X. Again, we don't know what our implementation date is going to be for the HOTMA and Inspire changes. And we don't know that because we're still waiting on some software compliance. So I've committed to just doing our regular admin plan updates effective May 1st. And then once we know when we are going to implement HOTMA and Inspire, I will do another admin plan update with a public hearing that will include specifics to that information later in the year. Right now, our PHA plan and our admin plan public hearing is scheduled for March 22nd, 2024. Each year, I send you all a flyer and links for the Resident Advisory Board. I will be sharing that again this year in early February. What we ask you to do when you receive that flyer is just to put it in a place where your participants will see it. That could be physical in your office, that could be on your website, wherever your participants might see it. The Resident Advisory Board is a requirement for our PHA plan, in that anytime we make changes that impact the households we serve, they must have the opportunity to provide feedback to those changes. And because, again, we are a unique housing authority and that we serve all 64 counties, we can't have a resident advisory board that just meets and discusses, but we want to allow everyone the opportunity to provide their feedback. And so they can do so by reviewing the admin plan and PHA plan drafts that we publish on the website in early February and providing us feedback. And that flyer that I will send to all of you gives them the information on how to provide feedback. And of course, they can attend the public hearing to provide their feedback as well. We did it with 23 minutes to spare. Are there any questions or any other topics that we could discuss? Again, thank you, Leslie, for sharing the link to the Inspire guidebooks. There's also a 2-minute video that goes over the different items. So that's a really cool resource that we will share with everyone. I don't think anyone can see the link, so I've copied it and I will send it out with, like I mentioned, information about the other programs, project-based to tenant-based process. And then I will have this recording as well as all the handouts posted on our the training page of our website. All right, you're welcome, everyone, for the information. I'm sorry, it always feels a little jumbled because, again, I only know what I know, and I can't wait to learn more, and I'm looking forward to some upcoming trainings. And then we're happy to share what we learn about HOTMA and Inspire with all of you. Great. Well, I'm going to end the recording and end the webinar. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day.